Hey everyone, my name's Dan and welcome to our video course on Power Apps. So today what we're going to do is that we're going to look at, we're going to continue with our hotel booking system, and what we're going to do today is we're going to link bookings to rooms, and we're going to use Power Automate to automatically assign an appropriate room. So this is the application which we've been going through so far. And since our last video, I added a new table called Rooms, in the same way as we did before. So we have a new table called Rooms. I've got a name called Room Name with the very imaginative Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, Room 4, Room 5. And for each room, I've fixed a nightly rate for this example. And I've also fixed the maximum number of guests that each room can hold. And I've also put in whether each room has a sea view and each room has disabled access. So what I'd ideally want to do is that each time when we go to a new booking and we assign a room, what we're going to try and do is look at the primary guest, fill in primary guest, check-in date, check-out date as normal. And then based on the number of guests, whether disabled access is required and whether a sea view, with myself over here, and whether a sea view is requested, we're going to automatically assign a room. So first thing we're going to do is to input a new lookup column for room. And then we're going to add a quick view form to this form here, so we can see once the room is assigned what attributes it has. We'll probably do that at the end. And then we're going to go through a Power Automate flow as to how to use Power Automate with Dataverse. And I have here some examples of common pitfalls with Power Automate and Dataverse. So firstly, with Power Automate, very often we're using logical names. So logical names for the columns, logical names for the tables, and I go through that as we go through it. Also, the way we assign lookup columns is not very obvious in Power Automate. So a lot of Power Automate, and its unique selling point is that it's a low code platform. And there's lots of things you can do with Power Automate which are definitely low code. But once you start wanting to do something a little bit more customizable, and especially with lookup columns, then it more or less becomes code. So we'll go through that today. But once you get used to it, then you get used to it, and it's actually it's no problem. But it just takes a little bit of understanding what it's doing. And then lastly, we can go through some OData syntax. So if you've worked on databases before, you may be familiar with SQL, where you query a database using selecting certain columns and filters. What Power Automate and Dataverse uses is OData, which is, in my opinion, it's a similar sort of, using a similar function, but this is what you use for Power Automate. And OData is always good to use because you use it as well for querying APIs as well. So we'll go through that today. So I think the first thing we're going to do is add let's go to our Power App. Let's go to our solution. We're already in booking. Let's make this a bit bigger. So as you see at the screen here, we have sort of, maybe I should make it clear before, we have table properties, schema, experiences and customizations like this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in a bit, so you'll see sometimes things may be, because I've zoomed in a bit, things may be a little bit not in the order that you'll find it, but essentially everything is the same. So let's go booking, columns. We'll add a new column. Now I'm going to call this one assigned room. Data type is lookup. We'll make it not required because the way I have the process for this example is that this won't be filled out by the user. The Power Automate flow will automatically assign a room, so it's not a required form. It's not required field of the user. And then related table, if I put in room, there we go. Now if we click save, let's save and do its job. So while it's saving, think of the parameters that you want to do to assign a room. So for our bookings, we have a number of guests, we have disabled access required, and we have a C view. So the way I'll book it is, first things first, if the number of guests is, each room that's assigned must have a maximum number of guests which is greater than or equal to the number of guests in the booking. The second thing I'll assign is, if disabled access is required, then the room must have disabled access. And then the third thing is required is, if there is a preference to see view, if there's any available, assign that for see view, but it's not a required field. And I'll go about this as well. So we can, with the way we can use our ordering and our filtering, we can differentiate between things which are absolutely required and things that are nice to have. So I'll go through that as we go through. So let's go add a new object. Let's add a new cloud flow. So we can add automation cloud flow. I think this one will be automated, because it will automatically trigger when we create a new booking. So we'll call this one assign room to new booking. And for our flows trigger, we'll do when a record is created. Will that come up there? We may have to put in Dataverse. Yeah, when a row is added, modified, or deleted. So we'll do that and then create. Now what I'm going to do, if you log in through make.powerapps.com and you have the purple thing assigned here, you're going to get what's called the old Power Automate view as of mid 2025, which is fine, but I'll just sort of work with this a little bit, and then I'm going to go to powerautomate.com where we can see the new view, and the new view has certain more functionalities, and I'm just personally more used to new view. So I'll just do a few actions first, and I'll transfer to the new one. So anyway, so what we have here first is Microsoft Dataverse. So this is connecting the flow to our Dataverse table. So if we just sign in, our thing will be here. So you don't see it, but on my screen the login thing is coming up, and now we've logged in. So now if we do change type, we're just going to do added for now. So just when a new record is added, we'll automatically assign a room. You may want to do added or modified, or added, modified, or deleted. Just one word of warning: if you ever use a modified trigger, make sure you can limit the scope or limit it in a certain way, because very often when you're modifying a row, you're using the flow to modify that same row, and then you're going to come into this infinite loop. So we won't worry about that today because our change type is just added. So we'll just keep it simple for now. But if you were to do added or modified, just keep that in mind and make sure that you do a lot of testing and making sure there's no infinite loops going on. So table name will be booking or bookings. I'll go for that in a minute. And then scope. So this is I'm just going to do organization. Depending on if you have business rule set up, you can limit that. And I'll just leave that for now. So select columns would be, it doesn't really matter for added, but if you're doing modified, you'd want to use this to limit to what column exactly is modified, so you don't end up with these infinite loops if you're modifying a different column in the same row. And then filter rows is if you want to just trigger it only on when a certain type of row is added. So for example, for our booking example, if it's a booking in the future or something like that. I'll leave it blank for now, but there will be other flows in the future where we would need these. So that's fine. And then we go new step. So I think the first thing we're going to do, we're going to have various controls, well conditions. We have a condition here. So actually, do we need a condition? No, we won't use conditions yet. We'll delete that. We'll do it another way. We'll do it by list rows. So what we want to do is that when we add a new booking, we want to retrieve just a list of rooms. So in this case, table name, I'm going to call room or rooms, and then work on these select columns in a minute. But what I'll do is just go save. Let's hit save, and now once it's saved, I think I'm going to go to the Power Automate website, access the same flow, but you'll see it'll look a bit different because this would be the new modern interface. So let's go to make.powerautomate.com. My flows. Let's go to the right environment. Live. Here we go, assign room to new booking. Zoom in a bit. And then edit here. So we have here, this is what the new interface looks like. So it's a bit more user friendly, I think. So let's change the names of this. So if you want to change the names, so we have when a row is added, modified or deleted, or list rows, so the platform will automatically give it a name. But if we're using multiple tables and multiple lookups, it kind of, you can get confused quite quickly. So if you click these, click on the action, click on the box, sorry, and then click on these, just edit it here. Let's say when a new booking is made. And then this one, we're listing the room. So this one will be list rooms. And what we'll do is just to start off with, we'll just assign the first room to the booking. So we'll take it step by step. So in this case, we want to update a row. This one will be bookings. And then this is row ID. So what we want to do is when you want to, in Power Automate, update a row, it's not so, unless you know the GUID up front, you may have to do some filtering beforehand to get the GUID, because this updated row requires a GUID identifier so it knows which row it is to update. So luckily when we add a new row, the trigger will automatically trigger, and so we can automatically get the GUID. So if we go on the, so also every time you add a text box, you'll see a Thunderbolt and a FX. A Thunderbolt is a variable from a previous step. So if we want this value to depend on what we retrieve from a previous step directly, you would use the Thunderbolt. FX is an expression, so Power Automate has its own sort of syntax of functions, much like Excel has. So with Excel you press equal sign, then do a bunch of functions. Power Automate also has its own functions. They're in a bit of a different syntax. They're probably a bit less flexible in certain ways, but I'm sure we'll use these functions. In fact, we'll use these functions in a bit. So for this one, for the row ID, if we go to Thunderbolt, we see here we've got a list of parameters that were created from previous steps. So you want when a new booking is made. And then this one you see here, booking unique identifier for entity instances. So usually the GUID will be saved in a column name which is the same as the name of the table, and you'll see this unique identifier for entity instances here. So you see that there. Okay. That's all good. And you'll see here when we highlight, you'll see here trigger outputs. This is like the code name of actually if we go to code view. So here in parameters we sort of use graphical interface to tell the system what we want. And then in the background, this is what is happening in the code view. So we've got inputs, entity name, which is the name of the table that we're going to update a row in. And then record ID is the name of the row that we're going to update in this entity of called int underscore bookings. And it's usually, entity name is usually the name of the publisher underscore and then the name of the table in plural form. And then record ID, again this is taking the column from the original trigger output, so the trigger of the flow. It's taking from the body, and then this is the name of the column which is coming through. So publisher name underscore name of table ID is what it usually is. So I'll leave it there for now. I'll save, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to test it, just so we can see what's going to happen. So if we go manually, publish and test, no errors. Why that's saying that, which is quite common. Let's just create a new booking and see what comes up. So we have here a number of guests. Let's put in 2 guests for now for Mr. Bean, and then we'll save and close this booking. Let's go to active bookings. So that's the one that's here. Let's see the disk trigger. Probably not, because it says workflow blah blah blah. Let's go back and edit what's going on here. Oh, here we go, it did succeed. Yep. So maybe quickly I'll just explain that error. So very often in Power Automate you'll get errors appearing somewhere, and because Power Automate is relatively new and has been updated quite often, and we have the new interface, the old interface, Dataverse, all this stuff, it's still a bit buggy. Luckily that one just worked anyway, so with some errors I would say just ignore it initially and see if it works. But if you were to troubleshoot, one way of troubleshooting is checking these connection references. So if this is not coming up correctly, then go change connection reference, then add new, and then log in again. Sometimes that fixes the errors. Sometimes just refreshing the page just fixes the errors. Again, there's some errors, and I'm sure this one I want to do it live because I want to make it as real to real life as possible. Some errors will appear and they'll just fix themselves randomly. Other errors will appear and the system is trying to tell you something, and we'll figure it out along the way. This is where I'm trying to just do things live as is, because definitely this is still a learning process. Yep, so we have the flow ran successfully. So when a booking is made, this is the inputs that come in. If we go show raw inputs, that's that, and then show raw outputs. Headers, that's just a bunch of connection-y stuff. And then here is sort of like the body of, so this is the data that's contained in the row, and this is how Dataverse stores a table. So for example, we have here the state code, the state label active, the checkout date. Here's a date. We create a booking reference. Here's our booking reference number. This is the time where we're creating on. And this here is the booking ID. So this number here is the ID of the row, of the new row that we created. So each row in Dataverse has its own ID and is used as a primary key, and it's like for two rows to have the same GUID is like stupidly rare, so it's effectively a unique ID. This is what we have here, and this is what we use in the action 2 actions along. So you see here 99F, and then when we go this one in update a row, you see here parameters, you see here record ID 99F, a bunch of numbers. So that's what we use to retrieve the booking. Cool. This is quite a flow that doesn't in itself at the moment is not actually useful because you've not actually assigned any rooms yet. So the next thing I'll do is that I'll assign just the first room that comes across. So you see here list rooms, and if we go to the raw outputs, so this is what I like to do, go to this. Ooh. Then raw outputs. You see I have the headers, and that just telling us the details of the connection. Maybe if I move my head over here, if I zoom in a bit more, will that make it a bit more? Yeah, perfect. And we have here body. So body is the data. So when we had our list rows, the body is what contains the data of those list rows. And then we have value. We have value, and then we have a square bracket here, and then at the end, at the very end, where is it? We have a square bracket here. Now if you're used to programming at all, you'll realize that a square bracket is very typical of an array. So when we're retrieving a list, Power Automate will receive the value as an array. The array may only have one value, and we may be expecting one value, but it doesn't know this. So when we do a list, each list it will return as a list of, in this case, rows, or a list of rooms. And you see this array is separated by, we have here one curly bracket, and then all the data from one, let's go down slowly. Where's our, yeah, so I have here curly bracket, and then this is all the columns that we get from one row, which is one room, and then curly bracket to close, comma, open curly bracket, then data from another room, curly bracket, comma, open curly bracket, etc. until we have our, in this case, 5 rooms. And you'll see here that for each of the columns we have, so in our application we just have this one, we have rooms, we have room name, which is sort of a user-friendly way of saying name, whereas in this data it's saved under the publisher underscore and then name, and you'll see that quite often. So it'd be the publisher underscore and then what is called the logical name, I believe. Yeah, logical name. So you see here for disabled access, we just have here disabled access, quite user friendly, but in the back end it will store it as publisher underscore disabled access. And then for a choice column, which is yes or no, yeah, it saves it as true or false, etc. So that's that. So hopefully that's, I'm explaining a bit more what's going on in the background, because this, I feel like this context will make the next steps a lot more sense. One last thing about lookup columns there. So I think everything there was, the syntax was fairly straightforward, but let's look how lookup columns are stored in Dataverse. So if we go to scroll down, show raw outputs. So primary guest here is a lookup column. In our, if we go back to our bookings, active bookings, here we go, Mr. Bean. So Mr. Bean is our primary guest, and you'll see here it is a lookup column because we have the magnifying glass and it will look up to the guests table. How this is stored in Dataverse is as, what have I done? Is as follows. So you'll see here, these 3 columns here are defining the lookup column. So we have underscore publisher underscore column logical name underscore and then value. So the value here is the GUID, and this is what is being saved in the background. So it's not saving it in the background as Mr. Bean, it's saving it as Mr. Bean's GUID for the contacts table, which happens to be this. And then we also have this one called ID value primary guest / value at Microsoft.Dynamics Lookup CRM. These two, sometimes you see these two separated out. They, from what I can tell, they more or less do the same thing. They tell you what table is being looked up. So this is defining the row, and this is defining the table or the entity. Sometimes entity and table are used interchangeably in model-driven apps. So this is looking up the contact table, which is the logical name, or the contacts table, which is the schema name. A lot of times the schema name is the same as the logical name, but is the plural version. So sometimes you come up with weird things, like if you name this table, so you'll see here I've named, not here, you'll see in the solution I've named everything as a singular, but then Power Apps will then change that to the plural in certain instances where it deems it appropriate. So you have to bear this in mind. Sometimes you'll see contacts and then contacts is, for example, and that's just something that you may have to go back and delete the table and redo it again, or just live with it, but don't be surprised that this is another cause of errors as well. But the important thing here is that we're not using Mr. Bean to look up to the primary guests. We're not using the name, we're using the GU ID. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to edit this flow so that we now use we're going to leave it now, just give me all the rooms, and I just want to assign the first room which it comes across. Let's move my head again. Just this first room that comes across for now, and then later we'll do our filtering. So we have here table name, row ID, and then we want to do room. So if we go assigned room, you see here, so when we want to update a row, it'll come up here with the rows which are we've assigned as business required. And if we want to update any other columns or fields, we can come into advanced parameters. You see here we have here assigned room underscore assigned room, and then you'll see parentheses rooms. Now, if we want to assign a new room, we need the GUID and we need the schema name. First, let's get the schema name. So let's go back to the solution, meg.powerapps.com. Yep, solutions. Yes, so you see table. You see here I've saved it as it's saved here as a singular. Now if we go room, the schema name is not always obvious. I'm sure there is another way to find out the schema name, but the way I typically do it is if I go to tools, and you can do here copy these, copy set name, copy schema name, copy logical name. You go copy schema name, and you'll have it here. Actually that was the wrong name, not the schema name, so even I get confused. Which one is it? So that's a schema name. Oh, the set name is just the lowercase version, that's the same. We have, oh, then we have here logical name, that's that as well. Maybe we did need the schema name. I think it was the set name. Yeah, it's the set name. Again, very confusing, and even I got confused there. So what I actually typically do is I go to tools again, and I click API link to table data, and then you'll see here this is coming up with, if you remember what we saw in list rows in our flow, when we looked at our flow, this is essentially giving the same data. So this is what Power Automate is actually doing in the background. It's calling the API and it's doing the same thing. And then you'll see here, this is the API call, which is a URL. And you'll see here, you'll have the set name here. Usually the set name is plural. And if it's a table that you've created yourself, it will have the publisher as a prefix. So if I zoom in here, will it work? It doesn't work here. But you'll see here, we have an API call and then called int underscore rooms. That is the one that we want, because that's return the same data that our Power Automate flow is taking. So if we go back to the flow, this is what we want here, the set name. Now, we also want to open and close brackets, and then use our Thunderbolt. Actually, we don't want the Thunderbolt. What we do want is the GUID of the first record. At the moment, we're just going to assign the first record that comes up, of the first room that comes up. However, we saw before that when we do our list rooms, it comes up with a big list of records. So we want to be able to tell Power Automate which one we want. So I think what I'll do here is I'll do take another array actually. We'll do it this way. So now I've clicked on functions, and you'll see here is a list of functions that we can use here in Power Automate of similar functions that you get in Excel by and large. But one function we're going to use is first. You see here first collection. This returns the first element from a passed in array or string. So let's click that. And you'll see here, if we go to dynamic content here, this will give us the same, this is the same what comes up with Thunderbolt. Just be wary that sometimes if you've searched for a function, like I've done first here, and then go to dynamic content, the search doesn't reset, so you may need to clear the search. But in any case, you've got a list rooms, and you'll see here body value list of items. So that gives us our list of rooms. So saying take our list of rooms, so this is our list of rooms, and then give us the first one. So what we're doing here is, if we go, let's actually go back to the API call. This is kind of useful actually. So this is our list of rooms. You see here we have a one here, and then actually that's one room, that's two rooms, that's three, that's four, that's five. So we have 5 rooms here. So what that function does is take all of this and just give us the first one. So it's already reduced it down to the first one. However, we don't want just the whole row, but we just want the GUID. So the value that we want, if I zoom in a bit more, zoom is 200. It's kind of hard to see here, but you see we have a column here called int underscore room ID. Oh, and then this gives us the GUID of the room. So we know from the previous example that when it's publisher name underscore table name ID. That gives us the GUID of the row, and then this will be the GUID of the row. Another way of working this out is if we go back to the solution and then to the room, we then go columns. We have a list of columns, and then you see one of these columns will be unique identifier. So what I like to do is sort. You can either filter or just sort Z to A, and you'll see unique identifier come up here at the top. And you'll see here's the name of the room, and you'll see here is the name of the column, but it's not quite the name we want. So if you go to the three dots, advanced, tools, and then copy logical name, if I move my head out of the way, here we go, copy logical name, and then go back here. This is how we define what column we want to pick from that first record. So the way Power Automate, if you want to move down the hierarchy, the Power Automate syntax is a question mark, square bracket, and then the name of the next level that you want to go down in single speech marks. So you see here we have outputs list rooms. You'll then get question mark, square bracket, speech marks, and the name of the attribute you want to get out of that. So we can just do this again. So we have our first one here. Let's go question mark, open square brackets, speech marks, that is the logical name, yep, logical name of the column. We have that, and then we go add, and that's everything. If that was a bit too hard, what you can do, I combine some certain steps there. Another way you may want to do it is if you do a select action or a compose, or let's say a compose. You may want to do a compose and then do your first here. Add. So if in this compose action we've selected the first record, but we've not selected which column we're going to use. But now with that compose, you can use Thunderbolts, and sometimes it does turn up here as well. So you can use compose to split things up into certain steps. Just as you get more comfortable, you'll see the code that you use start to make more sense. But personally, I like to just put it all in here because, let's face it, this sort of syntax is sort of high code anyway. I think once you start doing Dataverse stuff, low code sort of goes out the window. Or should I say, some stuff is definitely low code, but you definitely need to be comfortable using high code as well. So now instead of update a row, let's say assign room to record, save draft, and then with the test, so let's do the test again. Let's do manually this time. You see here comes sometimes, so what there was a warning, but it wasn't an error, it was a warning, and it was telling us that for large tables, returning all the rows may be unnecessary time. In this case, I know that the room table is only 5 rows, so it's okay for now, but we are going to do some filtering in a bit. So that's good. Let's now test this again. Move this back down. Let's assign Mr. Bean again. Check-in date will be, what's the date today? 21st. So just check in, yeah, 21st, and then check out 23rd. Then we'll guess it just 1. Doesn't need anything. And then if we save, that's then created the record, and now you see the flow is executed and everything is successful. So now we know that the room has been assigned. However, we're not seeing the form type here yet, so let's actually do that. Let's go to edit this form. So let's close this away and then edit this form. So if we go to booking, move my head out of the way, forms, booking, edit a new tab. You'll see here assigned room. Let's leave that there. And because I don't want the user to assign the room, I'll put this, move my head back again, I'll put this as a read-only column. So it will appear, but you won't be able to edit it. Save and publish. Just takes a few minutes. Yep, and then go back to the solution. Let's go back to the application. Play the application. Then if we go our current booking, you see here, yep, it's assigned. If I head out the way, we've got assigned room, and then we've got room 1. So I think I'll leave it there for now. So what we'll do in the next video, we'll look at filtering the rooms based on the fields which are there, because you don't want to assign room 1 to every guest that comes in. That's just not what we use it for. So we do want to differentiate what rooms are assigned depending on the attributes that we select. So we'll do that in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.